Hello, today we're going to be talking about our graduate school preparation and application guide. My name is Ellis Jones. And my name is Rachel Kala and Gola, and we are going to get into our project. So, to introduce our project, some of the goals we have were to make the graduate program admissions process more equitable and transparent for UTA students. So, to do so, we wanted to create accessible and comprehensive guides to equip graduate students with the resources to help prepare for post-bachelor education. Specifically, the inspiration for this entire project was to help those with less access to mentors and resources such as marginalized and first generation students to navigate this process. So, when we were figuring out why we wanted to do this, both of us realized that we had connections and people in our family that have gone through these processes before. And so they knew how to get mentors, they knew who to ask, they knew where to go, they knew how to basically guide us through this entire process, how to write personal statements. So we realized that first generation students don't really have those connections or resources at all. So they need more resources. Earlier on in the career, the better to receive those resources so they can start preparing and thinking and making those connections. And then secondly, there is an underrepresentation of marginalized students in higher education. And so we'll get into some more on that later, but that's why we wanted to create these guides so they can get resources the sooner the better. And we also just overall wanted to bridge the knowledge gap in admissions processes. Even for anybody, it's a very confusing process. And so the more comprehensive guide that you have and the earlier receiving that information, the better. So we created the graduate school preparation guide and also the guide to navigating graduate school application process. So to get into some of our methodology, we're going to talk about research and then our SME interviews and then actually creating the content. So when we were going through and researching, we identified two main reasons why this project is needed. And so UTA specifically, the reason we designed it for this population, obviously we go to UTA, but it's a very diverse population, has many first generation students. So actually 40% of UTA students identify as first generation students based off a survey they published in 2020. And so also 64.5% of students are from a marginalized population at UTA. So again, this is exactly the kind of population that needs this kind of resource. And then secondly, receiving post-bachelor education is even more important for psychology students. So we wanted this guide to be given to undergraduate psychology students as soon as possible, because if you are getting an undergrad in psychology, you need to know that in order to actually practice psychology, you pretty much need to get a psychology degree. There was some statistics that said about 1/4 of students said that with an undergraduate degree only in psychology, that they are actually doing a job post-education or post-bachelor that is related to psychology. The other 3/4 said that they were only doing jobs that were closely related or somewhat related. So basically, you need to be preparing as soon as possible, specifically psychology students. Third, other universities have comprehensive resources for graduate school, but UTA doesn't. So we were poking around and trying to find inspiration and examples, and we saw that some schools do offer these things as soon as possible to get their students ready for post-bachelor education. So we wanted UTA to have that resource as well. And then professors and advisors receive many questions about graduate school admissions, and so obviously the more resources, the better, and everyone can refer to this comprehensive, uniformed document versus just having confusing answers and confusing questions. And then third, Google searches help, but they don't give you the full picture. So it's, again, as someone who's going into this process new and they don't really know what's going on, to just find a Google search, it just, is the site even credible? Is this what most programs want? There's a lot of gaps there. And so we really just wanted to help bridge that gap. So in order to do that, we conducted interviews. We developed 15 structured interview questions, and we interviewed Brittany Sosa at UNT, Dr. Deborah Mullen at Texas Women's University, and Adriana Harris, UT Southwestern Medical Center. So we tried to select them based off of programs that were in the surrounding area and people that had different jobs within it, so they had seen different parts of the application process. So Brittany was a graduate coordinator, whereas Deborah was a professor and served on the admissions board, and Adriana was an educational coordinator and helped place and organize students. Anyway, so some of the major findings that we found is that they all talked about the holistic view of application. So all of the SMEs and mentioned that, if you were lacking in another aspect, you could make up for it in other aspects of your application. And specifically, this leads to number 2 is organizational fit and passion coming out in your personal statement and developing your writing skills. So writing skills are absolutely crucial to have to go into graduate school. They don't teach you them formally in graduate school, so they're looking for someone who can already write. So developing your skills sooner, we incorporated that into our guides. And organizational fit and passion, they all talked about how important it was to show your organizational fit in your personal statement, because they would select a student that really had an interest in the actual specific program and how they would look and fit. That was a huge part for them. And so they all talked about that. And then undergraduate research is very important. Other extracurriculars didn't matter as much, they didn't matter as much, but undergraduate research did, because they want to see you in the academic setting. So again, we wanted to include in our preparation guide lots of resources and steps and to actually get into these undergraduate research and how to reach out to professors, because students don't know how to do that, and they're left in the dark, and then it's confusing, but they really need that experience to get into graduate school. And every single program said their GRE wasn't required, which is very interesting. As we've seen, it doesn't predict performance as well as we would have liked for graduate school. So, but we also included information about it because some programs do want the GRE. And so they also talked about how GPA requirements differ. So for some of the programs, like the UT Southwestern's program, the clinical PhD program, highly competitive. So the average GPA was about 3.7 or above, whereas other ones were about 3.5. And also number 5, your recommenders do matter. They say they saw a lot of students that will submit recommendations from a friend or a family member. And obviously these students would do better if they knew better. So that was another thing we really incorporated a lot about who you should select and why you should select them and how you should reach out. And lastly, funding is complicated, but there are options. So it's very program specific. Every single program has different grants, fellowships, scholarships. But we just wanted to give them information about each option, and so that they can do their own digging. And so this leads us to our actual content creation. And we developed our content using SME interview data, as we've gone through, and also the UTA website. So we would actually link resources in the UTA website, like the Writing Center or the GRE prep course, to help prep students and lead them straight to the information they need to know versus trying to go find it themselves. It's all right there. They can go click on it. And other websites, we found credible resources. We would link them if they wanted to do more digging their own. Here's a credible resource that we used. Also, we crafted our content to be informational, engaging, professional, and modern. So we used informational versus, maybe a demonstration or videos or practice or something like that, because there was a meta-analysis that talked about how, based on learning criteria, if people are actually learning information, and just giving people information is just as effective as using mixed methods, and it's more effective, in fact, than demonstration or practice. And so we chose informational, and then we wanted it to be engaging. So we actually included reflective exercises to get students to engage and think about the content. We also wrote in content in a very conversational and informal format, because we wanted students to not feel, scared of it. Like, we wanted it to be able to be readable and engaging and more relaxed. And then we also designed slides to be professional and modern, so students would actually engage with it. So this leads to our first giant deliverable. We made a 45-page slide graduate school preparation guide. This included a section about graduate school readiness. This is a lot about, there was reflective exercise there and how to do your research and informational interviews you could conduct. And then we did the second part of it was beginning the process. This was freshman and sophomore year. This was all about finding mentors, getting involved, attending conferences, a lot of that good information that you need. And then third, the application preparation. This was, GRE, personal statement, all those good things. And then frequently asked questions, some one-off information that we got in the interviews that couldn't really be incorporated within the actual content. So here's an example of what are your goals. This is the 5 and 5 exercise we developed. And this is where you take 5 minutes to answer these questions and identify 5 realistic career goals. So our goal with this was to get students thinking about their actual strengths, weaknesses. Are you really ready for graduate school? Because that was a big piece, is a lot of students, they may not be ready and they may not know their goals, or, as freshmen, just trying to get them to think like, yeah, you maybe do want to, if you actually want to do psychology, you might want to start preparing now. So getting them thinking about that. This is another thing we included. This is our 4-year graduate school preparation list, is another example. And we just broke it down by year about what they really need to be focusing on, and just kind of having a checklist. And we went into basically all of these different points throughout our entire guide, but this was our overview. And then just to show you some of what the content would look like is like, what factors should I consider when selecting a program? We right here, this is 4 out of 8 of them, but we got culture, research advisor, cost, reputation, all those things that students need to be thinking about as they're trying to understand what even is a good program and what should I select. And this leads us to our other deliverable that we created, which is the guide to navigating the graduate school application process. And so this was a little bit of a shorter guide, probably like I think it was 33 pages. And this had some overlap as far as like that junior, senior year information that we reference in the graduate school prep guide. But this goes into just things about like GRE, you're getting, requesting transcripts, all that good stuff. And the target audience here was UTA junior and senior students and any prospective graduate student, because this was more general. It wasn't tailored just toward UTA, and the links weren't just about UTA. So that we included elements about selecting a graduate school program, elements of the application, and then the FAQ. So then here's an example of our FAQ, just to show you how we really incorporated these information points that we couldn't really put in the actual guide. And so things about like, should I apply? My GRE score is below the minimum listed for the program's admission requirements. So just things like that we thought were really important and interesting, but you couldn't really incorporate. So lastly, our conclusions and considerations that we hope that the graduate school prep guide can be dispersed to all UTA's freshmen and sophomore psychology students to help them prepare for the future. We also hope that the application guide can be given to any and all students who just want to know more about all those different aspects and how to navigate that stepwise in a stepwise manner. And then future directions, we just hope that this has inspired you to find and identify more resources to help marginalized and first generation students, because the more resources that are provided, the better chances we are of narrowing that gap and actually helping students navigate these confusing processes. So thank you so much. And any questions?